Welcome back. So May has been declared the yellow month, which is a month where we'll be talking about newborn jaundice or neonatal jaundice. But I'm sure you want to know exactly what that is all about. I will be coming back to studio to talk to Dr. Dela Ajosi. He's a pediatrician and he's also the president for the Accra chapter of the Ghana Pediatric Society. We'll take a clip just to see what a child with newborn jaundice looks like, and then we'll come back to discuss it.
Childbirth complications come in various forms. Neonatal jaundice is one of such. It is a yellow discoloration in a newborn baby's skin and eyes and occurs because the baby's blood contains an excess of bilirubin, a yellow-colored pigment of red blood cells. Though very common in newborns, resident doctor of the Department of Child Health of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Dr. Hilda Mantibia-Boy, said severe jaundice, if not treated on time, could damage the brains of babies. The Child Health Emergency Room of the Child Health Department of the Kolebu Teaching Hospital is recording increasing numbers of jaundice cases.
We see quite a lot of babies coming in with jaundice on a daily basis. There's no day that will pass that we will not see a jaundice baby coming into the OPD or the outpatients department.
She advised parents to pay more attention to their babies and report to the hospital on time.
People should not hide their babies in their rooms when they deliver. When you deliver in the hospital and you are discharged and you go home, still look out for it, because it is something that can happen. Even after you have been discharged, maybe the day after delivery or 2 days after delivery or even 3 days after delivery, when you go home, you should still look out for jaundice. And if you notice that it is there, come back to hospital.
Healthcare givers at the hospital say they are doing their best to save the lives of babies, but lack equipment and logistics.
We have a few intensive phototherapy machines, which we call the Firefly. Much more of them are welcome, because I wouldn't say they are enough. They are really good. More blood is welcome. More people can donate, so that when we need blood to do the exchange blood transfusion, it is not a problem.
Welcome back. So let's go straight into the topic and delve into it with Dr. Dela Ajosi, who's joining me. Good morning, Dr. Ajosi. So May is the yellow month. We're talking about newborn jaundice, but tell us what newborn jaundice is in the first place.
So when we say newborn jaundice, what we essentially mean is the yellow discoloration of the skin and the eyes of a baby in the first 28 days of life. Because you could have jaundice beyond the 28 days of life, but specifically, we want to focus on the first 28 days of life.
Okay, but would you say there's a specific reason for highlighting the first 28 days as against later on when they're still newborns?
Okay, it's important to highlight that first few days because that is a period where the child's brain is developing.
Right.
And the greatest impact of jaundice on a child is on a developing brain.
Okay.
So if you can address or arrest the problem within this period, then you have a bigger chance of averting the complications that arise from neonatal jaundice.
Very well. So what would you say accounts for the yellow discoloration, and what are some of the causes for this?
So the yellow discoloration that we see is essentially a byproduct of the body trying to break down our red blood cells. Okay. It's a byproduct. So you have jaundice, or bilirubin as we call it. I have a bit of bilirubin or jaundice as we have it. But the reason why we don't see it in you or I is because there are mechanisms in our body that ensures that that byproduct is excreted from the body essentially in your urine.
Right.
Babies have issues with dealing with this byproduct.
Okay.
One, because they are generating it too fast, and two, because the major organ that deals with the excretion, which is the liver, is not fully developed enough to handle the quantity of the byproduct that is going through.
Okay.
And so they become more at risk of having high levels of it in their blood, and then it essentially gets into the brain and destroys it. So the second part of your question, what causes it? Commonly, children who are born premature are at risk of having neonatal jaundice. Babies who have infections of various forms. Babies who have what I call blood group differences between themselves and their parents. So commonly, if a mother is blood group O and the baby is blood group A or B, then that interaction can cause an accelerated breakdown of their red blood cells, and then they generate more of the byproduct, which is the jaundice.
Right.
Or if a mother is rhesus negative, so mothers who do antenatal will be familiar with some of these terms.
Right.
And the baby is rhesus positive.
So,
and
Dr. Josie, just so you don't confuse the viewers,
Yes.
when you talk about rhesus, positive and negative, is that related to the blood group, where we say O positive or A negative? Or
Exactly.
what?
It's related to the blood group. It's the reason why I pointed out when mothers go to antenatal, they always thought, oh, your blood group is O positive
Right.
or A positive.
Okay.
There are implications for all of that. So away from the blood groups, you also have babies who have abnormalities with their red blood cells that sort of causes the body to break them down faster than they would do normal red blood cells, okay? And then you have some other chemicals that we all have to protect us from various compounds in the body. There are children who lack some of them, what we call GC-species deficiency. And so when they come in contact with certain chemicals, more commonly in our certain camphor balls, then it also causes an accelerated breakdown of their red blood cells. And once again, more byproducts, and then the jaundice. Okay, so within our setting, this is what I'll call the common cause of it. I must point out that there are some structural problems in a baby's body that can cause another form of jaundice that will require surgical interventions. Okay. So we have to highlight that as well. Okay. But the common ones are the ones I said previously. Yeah.
But Dr. Josie, in mentioning the causes, you mentioned something very important, which traditionally we all use, which is the camphor balls, the naphthalene balls as we know it to be. Some mothers from old traditions, they'll put it in water, they'll put it in their clothes. So moving away, or when you come into contact with these mothers, is it that they don't know that this camphor can lead to jaundice, or they just, for lack of a better word, can't be bothered because they want to protect their, items against insects?
I think the former is what the situation is. Most people are not aware of the implications of using camphor balls to preserve the clothing of their children. And so with increasing awareness, we are getting more and more mothers to work with us along those lines. So I think that's where the education has to come in.
But for the discoloration, some mothers out there are also worried that they see their children's palms turning blue. Is that also classified as jaundice?
No. No. Jaundice, like I said, is yellow. Okay. Blue means something else. I mean, either a heart condition or a lung condition. Okay, but for our purposes, yellow is jaundice, and that's what we're worried about.
Very well. So, Dr. Josie, within how many days would you say this is jaundice we should be worried about, or maybe this is jaundice that can pass? Because some mothers from, childhood, they've been taught how to manage jaundice at home using the natural sunlight. So at what point should I be worried enough to bring my child to the hospital?
You must be concerned about jaundice within any day of the period that I've stated. But we are more worried when jaundice is observed within the first 24 hours of life. When you observe that, then chances are that there's an underlying problem that is accelerating the production of that jaundice. Beyond the 24 hours, it may or may not be pathological, or it may or may not be because of an underlying problem, because by and large 6 out of every 10 normal baby deliveries will have jaundice, and 8 out of every 10 premature delivery will have jaundice. So you see that it's really common. Okay, the problem is that there's a thin line between what is normal and when it becomes so pathological that it can accelerate the damage. And because we are not sure at that thin line, we rather err on the side of protecting the children, because you require just minimal intervention to avert a lifelong disability. And so in that context, we don't want to encourage people to be at home and feel that simply because they expose their children to sunlight, all is well. Just have a health worker eyeball your child, and then they can reassure you that this is minimal, go and come back in 24 hours, or this is a bit of a concern, let's keep you in, observe you for 1 or 2 days, do 1 or 2 tests, and then be sure that the child is safe.
You talk about disability. What kind of disability can you have from having neonatal jaundice?
The commonest disability are physical disability, what we call cerebral palsy. Neonatal jaundice is the leading preventable cause of physical disability among Ghanaian children. And this is from a study that was done by one of our colleagues in our department. So, but aside the physical disability, you have intellectual impairment. So you have children who have challenges learning. you have hearing impairments. You have children who have difficulty hearing, and because they cannot hear, then it means that their speeches are also delayed, because it's what you hear that you say.
Right.
And then a number of them will also have abnormalities with their eyes as well, because your eye moves because there are muscles in it.
Right.
And the same damage you have with your what I call your external muscles are the same ones that you have with your ocular ones around. And then finally, you have children who end up with epilepsy or seizures or convulsions. Okay, so these are, I mean, in short, some of the problems that you can encounter have as complications.
Right.
Yeah.
So finally, when a child has jaundice, what do you do to treat or manage it?
Okay, so it depends on the severity of the jaundice. But traditionally, I don't know if you give me a little time to talk about preventing as opposed to getting into the treatment itself. Okay, so we want to encourage the idea that we want people to be able to take measures that will prevent us from having the severest form. So we advise mothers, as soon as you know, go and register into a comprehensive antenatal care, because it's there that you have your blood group assessed, and if you're at risk, it will be attended to. If the infections will be addressed. Make sure that you deliver in a facility that is certified for safe delivery. So i.e. there has to be a health attendant there. You have to be somebody who can check the baby and say your baby is fine. Okay, so fast track to the question you asked me. So depending on the severity, we can do a number of things. If it is mild, moderate, then we can put you under a blue light, what we call phototherapy. And it's the same mindset that mothers have about putting their children under the sunlight. But the intensity may not be able to solve the severity of the problem. So we put you in that blue light. We check the levels of the bilirubin in your body, and then as it reduces below a certain level, then we can take you out of it. During that period, we will try and identify any problems, underlying problems that may have put you into the same situation. So either you have if the baby has an infection, we'll treat the infection. If they are dehydrated, we hydrate them well. If they're having challenges feeding, we take care of that. If they have surgical problems, we'll address that. There are one or two babies who come in so late that the levels are extremely high. So it means that we need to use a more intense light. And in places where it's not readily available, like in our settings, then we are compelled to take out the whole blood of the child and substitute with another blood, so that we are trying to, within the shortest possible time, take away as much of the byproduct out of the body. And then because the baby still needs blood, then we replace it with blood. We want to move away from this kind of treatment, because you can imagine in your eye, thinking through it, about how the whole setup, taking blood from a baby, putting it back, the mother, the trauma and all that. So we need to have more and more intense light, because with an intensive phototherapy, then we can do away with this exchange. So in short, that's what we do.
Very well. And with the prevention, certainly we wouldn't even get to management and treatment of neonatal jaundice. And so I have been speaking to Dr. Dela Adjosi. He's the president of the Greater Accra chapter of the Pediatric Society of Ghana, and he's also a pediatrician at Kolebu Teaching Hospital. We have been talking about neonatal jaundice. You and I have a role to play in preventing this, so we save our children from being disabled when they grow up.